Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session of the Montgomery County Council Audit Committee. We have three reports that we will be reviewing today. First up is a briefing on the Merit System Protection Board fiscal year 2023 independent classification and compensation audit. I know we have a presentation from the Siegel Group all set up. We also have representatives from the Merit System Protection Board and our Office of Human Resources with us today. And so I'm going to first turn it over to Mr. Anbinder to take us through and introduce who we have with us.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Just a little bit of background information before I turn it over to the consultants from the Siegel Group, who will provide more information. As the committee is aware, the Montgomery County Charter stipulates that MSPB, the Merit System Protection Board, must periodically hire an independent outside consultant to conduct an audit of the county's classification and compensation plan and procedures. MSPB entered into a contract with Siegel in 2023 to conduct this audit, and Siegel conducted its work over calendar year 2024. Again, Siegel will present on its process as well as its findings and recommendations. I'll draw the committee's attention to the attachments on Circle pages 3 through 16, which includes the Office of Human Resources comments in response to Siegel's recommendations, as well as MSPB's recommendation. And then I'll also just note at the end of the staff report on regular page 3, the board, MSPB, upon receiving Siegel's recommendations, had recommended that the county personnel regulations be amended to include provisions that require OHR to provide the board with quarterly progress updates and an annual progress report detailing OHR's efforts regarding the MSPB recommendations post-audit. OHR has indicated that it may be more appropriate in their view to limit these updates to every 2 years. And so that may be an item that the committee is interested in discussing or learning more about after the presentations and comments. So first, in just a moment, I will turn it over to the consultants from the Siegel Group, Dr. Singer and Mr. Konsinski. After that, I'll turn it over to comments from Executive Director Henfling of the Merit System Protection Board, as well as Director Anderson and Mr. Frischauer of OHR. So for now, I'll go ahead and turn it over to the Siegel Group to share their screen and begin their presentation.
Thank you very much, Logan. Andrew, you gonna?
Yes.
Well, let me start by saying thank you all so very, very much for inviting us here today to present a brief summary of our findings and recommendations stemming from MSPB's classification and compensation audit. We're delighted to be here and appreciate that you're taking the time for it. Next slide, Andrew. Today we're going to start out with introductions and an overview of what we did and why we're here anyway. Talk about the project initiation and our data collection devices. We did a classification and compensation audit. We'll share about that as well as the QES methodology, which is the county's job classification methodology, and end up with our audit recommendations. We have findings and recommendations, and this is brief. I will tell you that this is designed to be very brief. We also have a longer deck in case you're interested. And I know, as Ed and Logan know, an 84-page report. If I were you, I'd go for the longer PowerPoint if you want more information. Our project team, as you can see here, this is the Siegel project team. I'm Paula Singer, and they call me the relationship manager, and basically I summarize it as the buck stops here. Andrew, as well as Mary Ann Edwards, were the project managers on this project. One had the classification, and the other ran the compensation aspect of the project. Our staff was supported by Jared Wilson. Jared ran the pay equities component, and Tarun and Richie were the analytics. They were the analytics team, and Jared supervises them. You'll see on the far left side, DIR, that's Decision Information Resources. So when we undertook this project, the board of MSPB, and I think via the county council, but I'm not sure, wanted the consultant to engage a minority business enterprise to work closely with us. And we hired DIR in order to do that. And they had a big chunk of the project the employee survey, which Andrew will be telling you about shortly. So we also want to thank Ed Hensling, I never quite got his name right, and Janice Curtis and Bruce Martin before him for being wonderful clients to work with. They made it easy. They could get us information. And by the way, Logan was very helpful in that as well, and Craig. And we also worked closely with the Office of Human Resources staff, not so much in discussing findings or anything, but as a way to access information that we needed to analyze. And they too were very helpful. So what did we did and why? MSTB, by its own regulations, must conduct an audit of the county's compensation and classification systems about every 5 years in order to ensure the accuracy, equity, justice, validity, and integrity of the comp and classification programs, as well as their effectiveness. So Siegel was asked to conduct this audit. We were also tasked to determine if programs are administered fairly and equitably to meet the needs of the county and in order to recruit and retain a high-quality workforce. In addition, we were tasked to compare these comp programs to other organizations in the region, both public sector and private sector, and you'll see where we've done that. So next slide, please. So basically, our scope of service involved an assessment of the 2018 audit. What was done, how was it done, did OHR implement, were there obstacles to implementing? And we have a summary of that task, this is assessment, in the appendix of the report that can be sent to you. We also did the comprehensive audit on the classification and compensation systems, both very, very large systems for a very large county organization. And then you'll see some recommendations. Next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to go into more of the details.
Thank you, Paula. Appreciate that. So on a more granular level, our audit consisted of the following 5 steps. So it's project initiation and discovery. This included reviewing data, conducting interviews, reviewing the prior audit report, and determining what may or may not have been implemented. We then conducted audits of the classification and compensation programs. These included an employee survey, reviewing the classification process, reviewing the classification specifications themselves, and also an FLSA audit. The compensation audit included a compensation action review, a pay equity analysis, a market assessment, and a pay compression analysis. We also reviewed the county's current job evaluation system, QES, and ultimately developed findings and recommendations based on our audit. So for the project initiation and discovery, as part of that work, we conducted interviews with county and union leaders, and that yielded the following key themes that helped drive the direction of our audit. Those include outdated job documentation, lengthy classification process, internal equity concerns, and limited transparency and information availability. However, there was also well-received comments on pay and benefits, and generally optimism regarding potential improvements to the compensation and classification programs. So the key components of our classification audit included an employee survey, a study of individual classification requests, a study of occupational classification requests, and a review of the actual class specifications themselves. So, and just for clarification, reclassifications are generally when employees or supervisors request a review of their class specification due to changes in scope, level of responsibility, et cetera, for their roles. So some key findings that we identified for the employee survey. From a manager perspective, only 33% of managers knew how to request reclassifications. From an employee perspective, only 65% know where to find their job description or class specification. And regarding the reclassifications themselves, most respondents reported waiting 7 to 12 months for an answer. For the individual classification reviews we conducted, we requested 73 study files, which include all the backing documentation for those requests, and we received 67 of those. with an average duration of 321 days. Similar with occupational requests, we requested 21. We received 17 with an average duration of 440 days. So typically we found these types of studies to take no longer than 30 days to complete. So that was a significant finding. And then for our review of the class specifications, after the 2018 audit, a new class specification template was developed. Of those class specs that we reviewed, only 22% had been converted to that new template. 77% roughly of the county's class specifications have not been reviewed in over 10 years. And then broadly speaking, we concurred with the FLSA determinations for the classification specifications that we reviewed. Our compensation audit was broken down into 4 key components as well. That includes a review of specific compensation actions, a pay equity analysis, a market assessment, and a pay compression analysis. So for the compensation actions, we reviewed individual pay increases from 2019 to 2024. We found over 34 different types of, quote, compensation actions that would include promotions, reclassifications, and the majority of the actions and the pay was attributable to annual wage adjustments, which we would anticipate and expect to see. We also conducted a pay equity analysis to better understand the impact of gender and race and what impact that may have on current compensation levels. We identified no systemic bias in compensation levels based on gender and or race and ethnicity. We conducted a market assessment where we reviewed 77 classifications and pulled market data from peer organizations and published survey sources. We found that overall the county was market competitive, paying at 101% of the market. And we also conducted a pay compression analysis. So this included looking at roughly 12,500 employees, where they were paid within their respective pay grade ranges. And what we found was almost 60% of employees were paid close to the top or over the top of their range max. Additionally, we looked at employees who have 10% or less difference in pay between themselves and their direct supervisor. We found 1,022 instances where that took place, and of those 1,022, there were 233 instances where employees were being paid more than their direct supervisor. This next slide shows in a little more detail how the county compares to the market based off of their base pay range. And so down at the bottom, when we've broken it out by peer data sources and published data sources, but the overall market average at the minimum, midpoint, and maximum of the ranges go from 97 to 102%, which we consider, broadly speaking, to be market competitive. The next slide includes, shows in more detail a breakdown of average salary by minority status and bargaining unit. And while you'll see that there are some differences here, we further broke these down by various cohorts, including years of experience, FLSA status, pay grade, etc. And when we reviewed at that level, we were often able to identify a rationale for any gaps that we're seeing here. And then finally, we did an analysis of the QES system. And now QES stands for the Qualitative Evaluation System and is used at the county to score positions and assign grades. And while the tool is effective in grading positions relative to each other within the county, it doesn't account for external market conditions. And so we'd recommend that the QES system be partnered with an external market assessment to better identify appropriate grade placement for positions. Now I think I'm going to turn it over to Paula. Paula, if you wanted to walk through our audit conclusions and recommendations, that'd be great.
Sure. Basically, let me do an overview for a moment first. One of the first steps that we would recommend, and we don't have it in detail because we haven't really assessed it, the county does not have a compensation philosophy. And we think it would be very important for the county to have a compensation philosophy which would direct efforts to how do you want to pay to the market? Do you want to leave the market? Do you want to be at the market? Who are your peers? Who you really want to get this data from? Who do you see as your peers locally or even aspirationally or the same size as you but in a different part of the country? That's important to have in a compensation philosophy, which ties very much to, we think that you should be doing, and that's in here, a whole scale market study. As Andrew mentioned, we only studied 77 positions. And to do a whole market study, it would be helpful if you had a compensation philosophy to direct that. And yeah, so that's an overview. Basically, as you've seen, we think that the processes should be redesigned and shortened in order to give employees responses in a timely fashion. It's also potentially a liability to have people working out of class for a year in terms of back pay or morale issues. Classification specs are outdated, so we suggest they get updated and on a regular frequency. And one of the things a lot of our clients do is review 20%, 25% of them each year on a rolling basis. You have many, many classifications, so depending on staff, that may or may not be possible. We think that you do have communications and education that you offer to managers and others within the county. But what we found from our survey is that a lot of employees just didn't get it, as well as managers. I know that the county has liaisons, HR liaisons in the departments, and they are offered training every year. And we reviewed the training, but one of the things we thought was it was not as engaging as it might be in terms of people remembering. You know, people will say to me, and I'll tell you, I just have this right now with IT training. Well, Paula, you took that last year. Didn't you know that? And who remembers, you know? So constant and overview. Next slide, please. So analyze the pay gap. So Andrew showed you that there was some pay gaps. We don't think it's systemic bias or anything, but there are some pay gaps that need to be looked at just in case that there are any issues that need to be addressed. So if there is a rationale, fine, and if not, you know, fix it. Rationales could be things that would include length of service, prior service in another county or other organization, and so forth. Performance, employees might have gotten star ratings that put them higher. And those would be things to look at to make sure that there is no discrimination in pay. We didn't find anything, by the way, that couldn't be explained. Review findings where we had some classifications that were below the market. See if that's correct, or if if some of these classifications should be upgraded to make them more aligned with the market. And as I said, conduct a comprehensive market assessment. What this means over here about the salary structures, your salary structures need to be, okay, in best practices, I think they need to be updated because you've got grades too close together. You have ranges that are wide at the bottom and narrow at the top, and best practices to do it the other way. And so if a market study is done, or even if a market study isn't done, it might be helpful to be looking at the design of the grades and the ranges. Next slide, please. So QES. QES has been talked about at the county for a lot of years from what we can tell. QES is the systems that's been used, and if it's updated, we can live with it, for lack of a better way of putting it. I personally believe that point factor systems are all basically okay as long as they're applied consistently. So as long as everybody understands QES, if it's updated to reflect the current work and changes in technologies and so forth, then QES is fine. However, jobs are graded based, for the most part, jobs are graded based on the outcome of the classification study. But from what we can see, there's not much correlation of it to what the market pays. So you've got a system that's very heavily weighted on internal equity, looking at the internal factors, but without as much consideration for the market. Now, We know that OHR does use some market information when it looks at some of these studies. And we would recommend that they purchase some published data that would be more respected and tested and true, for lack of a better word. Yeah, the ones that you're using, we wouldn't use, and we can certainly suggest what you might want to use to look at the market. We've found that some of the factors and definitions were outdated for QES, so we thought about job architecture, and I know we shared that with some of the HR people. And the job excerpt would be a good alternative. I wouldn't go wholeheartedly into it, but I think that's really something to be looked at very seriously for managers and senior professionals. And validity and reliability are difficult. And I'll say it's difficult to achieve for absolutely any kind of point factor system. So provide ongoing training, parallel evaluation, and consensus techniques. I will say that I know the classification team does that. There's usually 2 people who review every classification to make sure that they're both seeing it the same way. And that's helpful. But yet, it doesn't do that much good if it's not in conjunction with what does the market say. I mean, you can have the cleanest point factor system, but if it doesn't put you in the job where you can hire and retain employees, that becomes a little difficult. So I will say that Andrew talked about, when he talked about the themes around this project, our findings, one of the things that he found was that, well, that we all found in analyzing the team, that there was an optimistic look going forward. I think everybody we interviewed knew that Director Anderson was new to the county and the system, and knew that there was going to be a lot of changes. One of the things I love when there's a new director of HR in place is that that person doesn't own the history. So it can be looked at clean and fresh, and what changes need to be made. We also work closely with Mr. Tinnick, who is head of the classification component, and we know that he and his team have been increasing their training in the QES and other systems, as well as hiring more staff. I think one of the problems with having responses in a timely fashion is the fact that the OHR was very short-staffed in this area. So, next slide, Andrew. So, Ed, I hope we made it in a short enough time, and we are more than happy to answer your questions.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You did a great job in taking a very long report and putting it into a short PowerPoint. I did review the full report and appreciate that. Before we open it up to questions for the Siegel Group, I wanted to give the Merit System Protection Board and our Director of OHR an opportunity to speak to this, and then because they may answer some of our questions. Ed, if you could press the button so we can hear you.
It was not on.
So the recording can hear you. Yeah.
Awesome. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for your time. On behalf of the Merit System Protection Board, I'm Executive Director Edward Henfling Jr. Joining me today is Treva Hopkins-LeBoy, Vice Chair of the MSPB. Sonia Childs, Chair of the MSPB, was planning on attending today. Unfortunately, she has a family emergency and she was not able to show up. I also want to, on behalf of the board, thank the audit committee for having us here. I also want to thank Siegel for conducting the independent audit, and to Director Anderson for cooperating with Siegel's audit. And finally, I wish to thank council staff, past and present, MSPB members, past and present, and MSPB staff for their dedication and commitment. Specifically, I want to give a special thank you to Janice Curtis, who's the MSPB's Office Services Coordinator, who made the process run extremely smoothly. So I wanted to make sure that she was recognized. I know that Siegel had already pointed that out. I think, as has been said this whole time, we're supposed to do this audit every 5 years. Unless the council determines that a delay is necessary. Since 2001, there's only been 2 audits that have been performed, one in 2018 and then the current one that we're in now. When Siegel provided its report regarding the 2018, where OHR was with that, the MSPB was a bit concerned as to find out that very little had been implemented. Now, we understand COVID-19 hit. We had a new administration that came in before that. We had, including Director Anderson, 5 OHR directors. So there's a level of understanding that the board has regarding that. However, seeing that very little of that had been even really explored, the board wanted to make sure that that spending this money, close to $1 million of the county's money for these audits, that they result in something. The goal is to make sure that the class and comp system is efficient and effective and equitable. And there were some findings. Now, while the overall finding was the class and compensation system is working fairly well, there are some findings that the board really wanted to make sure gets addressed. And one of the things that the board considered was, what do we do? How can we, as a board, having this responsibility, having to ask the council for a lot of money every 5 years, how do we make sure that it's worth county taxpayer and service recipients money and time? And with the information that a lot of this didn't happen because of the turnover, the board considered the fact that every 4 years there could be a new county executive, a new administration, a new director of human resources. I'm not trying to shoo you away, Director Anderson. You and I been getting along very well for the past 10 years.
For a few moments.
But we wanted to make sure there was a way to ensure. And so the recommendation that the board has is that the Office of Human Resources provide a quarterly report that shows what their efforts have been, and then an annual report. The purpose for that, for many different reasons. First is, again, we want to make sure that the county is actively pursuing the corrections and recommendations. We want to make sure that these corrections and recommendations aren't punted down the road to another director, although, again, I want to make it clear that the board does not have that issue with Director Anderson. But we don't know what another director is going to do based upon some of the information that OHR had included in its comments. It's a reality. This could be swept under the carpet by someone. We want to make sure that incoming administrations are on notice that corrections do need to be made, and also that the MSPB has the information necessary to request the future audits be delayed to allow county to implement the corrections. Now, we are aware that OHR has suggested that perhaps maybe giving a report every 2 years. Discussing this with the board members, they still believe that 2 years is a stretch. It gets just too much time for this to be forgotten, which we don't want. The board needs to be able to see some movement to make sure that the class and comp system and the merit system itself is on the right path. So one suggestion was alternative, rather than every quarter and then a yearly report, do a biannual report. Again, the board thanks the audit committee for its time. I'm here to answer questions on behalf of the board, that's. I'm going to turn it over to Director Anderson at this point.
Tracy Anderson, Director, Office of Human Resources. I'd like to thank the committee for this opportunity to speak. For OHR, there's no news here. When I joined OHR after a lengthy career in Montgomery County, I've worked in a number of different agencies, including 11 years in the Department of Health and Human Services before going to MCPS and my other roots. The first thing I got when I came here was the former executive director, Bruce Adams, gifted me with a copy of the 2018 report. The first budget that I was able to present to you in the spring of 23, I was very clear and transparent about the challenges here. I said to you that the classification plan was woefully out of date. I pointed out to you the numbers of positions that hadn't been reviewed in more than 20 years, and I came with hat in hand asking for resources to correct that. Even though we weren't successful at that point, we didn't give up. We continued to move forward. At the time I joined the staff, there were perhaps 2 classification analysts and 2 compensation analysts. The county made a decision at some point, long before me, to disband the team, to rely on contractors. We have been intentional about changing that. In terms of the department's commitment to this, every part of our organization is working together and understands the imperative. It's not about me sitting in the seat. It's about what is necessary for our county government employees. So OHR shares the same goals and expectations as MSPB, the same drive that motivated the recommendations from Siegel. That's to assure an effective and efficient classification plan. Our strategic roadmap for fiscal years 25 through 27 clearly lists this as a priority. At the same time that we're working on improvements, we've continued to deliver the required services to support hiring and those tenets of the regs and/or collective bargaining. We couldn't stop, and we've been careful to adhere to county personnel regs and to keep fidelity to merit system principles and collectively bargained agreements, all of which have bearing on our class and comp practices. So we have a great deal to do. And it's been said that it may be said to you, that once we settle these issues, once we develop the compensation philosophy that we all can agree to and live with, once we have updated the classification plan and required salary updates, not just relying on this banded salary, but the real discipline that says this is how we're going to bring on employees, reward them throughout their careers. Once done and done correctly to update, we may not have the same need for annual desk audits for so many jobs or annual salary studies, compensation, classification studies for occupational groups of jobs. It's just that that part has been neglected for so long. There are practices of art that may be different from what Siegel is recommending, but we are certainly here and ready to move forward and to try. I just wanted to thank Executive Director Hempfling for his partnership. He's right. We've known each other for a long time and sort of grappled with a lot of thorny issues. And I want to thank Siegel for their participation. It's clear from their work that the same issues that were presented in 2018 have not gotten any better by failing to do something about them. So we're here to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Director Anderson. I think to make the conversation flow easily, I'll first ask if my colleagues have any questions, any of the technical questions or questions regarding the findings for the Siegel group. Council Vice President Juando.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the work, appreciate everyone's efforts, appreciate Siegel for joining. And I'm glad you made the point, Ms. Anderson, and both of you made the point that the stuff from 2018 is still a problem, and so I think that was very clear from looking at the report. But one thing I wanted to ask Siegel was, did you all look at a longitudinal historical workforce data as part of the audit? because the reason I'm asking is I know we made the finding that there weren't any systemic inequities, but I think you need to look at a historical analysis of workforce demographics, to really be able to be sure about that. And if you did, could you talk about it? If you didn't, would you recommend that we do that as a follow-up, or and others can answer that too? But I guess the first question is, did you all look into that at all?
No, not really. We did a picture in time. That's what we were asked to look at, just a picture in time. Should you do it? Of course. Yeah, but we looked at it. It's the only way you could do it, or we could do it within the time and scope of this project.
Okay.
We picked particular segments of the organization as well, where we thought there might be some issues. Either they're raised to us during our interviews with some of the department heads, or we said, let's see what happens here. And so we more looked at it purposefully, but still as a point in time. Longitudinally, that would make sense, although we did in part in the classification analysis when Andrew and his team pulled compensation actions. And Andrew, you want to talk about that? Does that fit?
Yes, I mean, so the compensation actions themselves were pulled from 2019 to 2024 within the window that we were asked to do the audit. And so yes, I mean, that review took place, but again, through the metrics of pay equity, to Paula's point, it was done at a specific point in time. And totally agree that, a longitudinal study would be, I think, a valuable course of action to take.
I appreciate that. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we did, I don't want to say that it was pay equity light, but it wasn't the kind of full pay equity study if we were engaged with OHR and we're looking at regression analysis, which we did some of, but it's not a full study. Although I will tell you, much to our surprise, we actually did the study looking at every single employee, every single full-time, part-time, not temporaries, not elected and appointed. So we had a lot of data. I think Andrew was just about 10,000 employees, 98 and change or something. Mm-hmm. And we got that through the census of employees that OHR gave us.
I appreciate that, and thank you for clearing that up too. And you actually teed up my next question about what you on the pay equity side, and I think you kind of answered this, but I'll just in an indirect way. Promotion access, job classification, disparities. Those are the kind of things I hear about a lot, and we didn't get into that level of analysis, right? And so while there might not be systemic, those could exist, right, and would need to be looked at.
I think that's go ahead, Paul.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's a fair statement because, again, we're focused narrowly for this study, and I mean, it's on pay, right? And is pay then downstream from, to your point, promotional opportunities, access to specific roles, that sort of a thing. So I think, yes, that's a valuable area to explore as well. And again, this is just dollars and cents looking at that, but to your point, a broader exploration of how and why people end up getting paid what they do, right? Again, whether that's promotional opportunities or other areas, I think is something that is definitely worth exploring.
But it could also be reclassification. Mm-hmm. And when you've got, people coming to you and saying, oh, I didn't get this, I didn't get that, I would venture to guess that some of it was not having reclassifications reviewed or not having a timely response. And that's one of the things we found in our employee survey, and where we also found many people didn't know how to request the reclassifications, and managers did not as well. Not all of them, just a portion of them did not know that as well. So if you have to wait, 300 days to get a request, and that is not, I don't want to say that that's typical, but there are cases. We did a whole analysis of the amount of time, but on the average, I think it came out about 300 days.
321 is what I read.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah, and that's a long time. And I know the staff is short, the staff is tight. I also recall that OHR only takes reclassification requests in June unless otherwise agreed to between OHR and the department head, and what they were calling then the June box. I don't know if it's still working that way now.
That was, I don't want to step outside the bounds of the question, but
you
yeah,
had that-
I was
you
curious.
put the box out there.
Yeah.
Director Anderson, if you wanted to answer that question.
So there's still a June box for individual classification requests. An employee can ask for their position to be reviewed during that period of time. Additionally, departments can request special studies where we would send out a job to be reviewed if we didn't have capacity internally. And there are other jobs through the collective bargaining process that we review on some schedule. So it's still a limited number when you consider that we have 500 job classifications and 10,000 employees.
And the main issue is from your perspective, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is the main issue resources to be able to get this done? And is that?
The main issue had been resources to get it done, a lack of team and a lack of capabilities as we move into this new work. That 321 days is no longer the case. I will find the information to give you the average amount of time that it took during the last June box, but we've been intentional about how we communicate and provide updates to departments as well as to handle those items. The biggest problem is that because it's so old, because the class plan is so out of whack, and the corresponding decisions around pay have become the same. Siegel mentioned that there should be a 10% gap, I would say, between an employee and their supervisor. I'll just say, the first time I was a supervisor, all the team made way more than me and just did for a long time because I was new to their discipline and new to the organization. So that isn't what is so concerning. 10% may be a benchmark, but I don't know that it's a sustainable benchmark for us. And that's something we would want to explore. But in terms of how employees navigate the system, I think we are improving in our ability to update and provide information in that way. We provide a 3 times a year engagement with HRLs. We are very willing to, we use some of our lapse funds to send staff to training to acquire these skills. We are working on this. It's a work in progress. But I want to say that no matter, I'm trying to build a team that will work whether I'm there or whether I hit the lottery and go sit on an island someplace. And the professionals that I have arrayed in the department will do this work regardless of who's sitting in the chair. We work that way. We work together. We fight about it internally, but we're going to get to a place where this is fixed. This should not be a problem. I have not run from the challenge, even though I wasn't sitting there to receive the 2018 report. And I told on myself when I got here, look at what we're dealing with. And I'm quick to do that. I'm not looking to place blame on anybody. I'm never looking to hide from it. I'm not scared of it. But I do need to have a chance to make this work, and I do need the resources to make it work.
I appreciate that. Just kind of a small question. Your point made me think about this, Ed, was the cost of the report and what we already knew and didn't know, and how that factors into the timeline of, and what Director Anderson said. I wrote, her first comment was, there's no news here. Just going forward, obviously we already Siegel's done a great job. We appreciate your work. The question of how should we structure these, the role of the board, the role of HR going forward. You said the 321 number's wrong, for example, like it's better now. Like, how do we get to a place where these type of reports are useful to moving us down the field? You know, my first 2 questions were like, well, what about this other stuff? And they're like, yeah, we should look at that. I mean, that's what I would have, if I was structuring it, I would have tried to be additive onto the 2018 report. And I'm just trying to say, did we do that here? And how can, if not, how can we do it better so that we're getting the information we need that's actually helpful to fixing the problems?
Um, there were a number of things that were not in the 2018 report, and had more been done from the 2018 report, I mean, we had to do some of this as baseline. We had to find out what was going on before we could even see that it wasn't additive. And we didn't have their working papers or anything. And by the way, our methodology was somewhat different from theirs.
Right.
I mean, some of it was very similar. And we would have been happy to look at it any other way we were directed. Was it additive? Actually, I think it was additive. We took 77 classifications and did a market study for them. We market priced the 77 jobs. We looked at 12 or 13 peers, local governments, as well as 3 large and important private sector data published surveys. I'd say that was additive. Mm-hmm. We outlined the processes that are used for classification and compensation. We looked at the process, even as like process steps, and made suggestions of where it could be shortened and tightened. We needed to look, for example, at those job specifications, job descriptions, in order to even know that they weren't up to date and comment on it. So you say what was new from the 2018 report. Frankly, I think they said the same thing, and the same answer still holds because that wasn't done. And I could go on, but I'll spare you.
I appreciate that. It was more, I think, to you, Ed, and
Sure.
I'll yield.
I am not clear on why this particular audit was not moved along down the road. I'm not really sure about the background. I got into this after all. I became the executive director after this was already started. It is certainly something that I have been looking at, trying to figure out. I don't know if it was internal, if it was an internal thing from the board's perspective, or if there were outside influence. I do know that every 5 years, if we're going to comply with the personnel regulations, that we have to do it. And there's nothing in the personnel regulations other than council can move it down the road. There's nothing that really gives the board information other than reaching out to OHR and asking, where are you with this? So again, that's one of the reasons why the recommendation was, why don't you give us some quarterly reports so we can see where you're going, where you are with this, and then we can evaluate where we need to go. And just one thing about the longitudinal study, the board did recommend that. Once that data that was provided, the board did recommend longitudinal studies, not only on the pay, but also on, I believe, the knowledge and the of the actual classification process, because there's some disparities between race as it relates to making the recommendation, whether it's a supervisor initiated or an employee initiated. So that was there. But as for knowing what we do down the road, it's just getting the MSPB being able to get information, know what it's looking at, see where they are with it, and perhaps in that circumstance and getting that information, we can then evaluate, well, we can actually do, and this kind of ties in, we can actually do another audit. We already have this information. We know where they are. Now we can go down this route. Right. We can look at this way. So again, the recommendation is more information driven and knowing where they are so that we can make this effective. I mean, we don't want to spend the county's money on these if it's just going to come up with the same thing. So
thank you, Madam President.
Thanks. Since we're on the topic, I wanted to go back to I know the board has said that in hearing the request from OHR that it come back every 2 years to report, and you offered a biennial report. I didn't know if OHR had any strong feelings regarding having a biennial report.
So I'm always confused about biannual versus semi-annual. I would still stand by a 2-year report. That's consistent with what we do for pay equity. It gives us time to collect the data, to actually do something about it in between. We have a very collegial relationship with this executive director. We understand our place in the role of MSPB. We would not at any time, and I'm going to venture to say that none of the staff would at any time refuse to give information were requested from MSPB. They would be an active and much consulted resource when we go through these steps to change the class and comp plan. I just don't know that there would be news every 6 months or every year. I do know that if we have a chance to work with the process, that there would be something to say in 2 years, provided we move forward. So I wouldn't want to send, here's your quarterly memo, still working on the RFP. I don't know that that is the kind of update, but certainly we would cooperate with MSPB to provide information that they need.
Evelyn, did you want to say any more about what the board's perspective or?
The board's biggest concern is they do not want this to be swept on, and we understand that Director Anderson wouldn't do that, but we don't know about other directors and how they would handle this. We want to make sure that these changes, these updates are completed. If they find a different way or another way to do things, or they find or they're able to correct it outside the recommendation, having that information, while we're looking at this angle, it would be extremely helpful for the board to know whether or not things are on the right track. Again, having a report, a report that's recurring more often than not, keeps it at the forefront, and that's the board's perspective. Now, and again, just for clarification, we can't change the personnel regulations.
Right.
All we can do is recommend it, and that's what we're doing here. But we feel that this will the board feels that this will make sure that these corrections are implemented eventually.
Right, and just to be clear, the person who makes the personnel regulations changes is the county executive. So we could, as a body, the audit committee, make a recommendation as well. But just to be clear, who gets to actually change those? I do think as we're discussing this, and Director Anderson, you did bring this up because I wanted to elevate this to the audit committee to have at least one more member of the council be able to hear this, because you have come before Government Operations and Fiscal Policy to talk about these issues, particularly during budget, but outside of budget as well. And I do think as we're having these conversations, to think about, is there a way to have and I don't know if formal report needs to be that, or some type of update a bit more frequently, also that this body, the council, can also be informed by that. Because I think having it be something that comes up for the full body, mostly during budget, when everything is compressed and there's a lot of information, and most frequently it is the folks who sit on Government Operations and Fiscal Policy that know all the details. Unfortunately, as we know, this and there are other things that are internal to our government that sometimes when tough budget decisions get made, don't make it across the finish line. And really trying to elevate the need for this, because it's, I think, as Council Vice President Jawando mentioned, it props up in other places, and it may manifest itself in someone being concerned about a promotion or something else. But if we start digging and figuring it out, was it the promotion, or is it the fact that our classifications are so out of date, and other things? So we don't necessarily have to come to a decision today. I would like to continue the conversation, though, and figure out some way of having some type of updates. I don't know if we necessarily have to call them reports, but some type of updates that was also shared with the council, so that we are looking at these recommendations from Siegel and how we're moving towards that, and understanding the resources that need to be behind that to get there. because I think Director Anderson, you are making progress in some areas, but it's your ability to do that and your department's ability to do that is when we need to take giant leaps forward. You're only able to kind of take a couple of steps each year, and I think we need to figure out how we're going to take that giant leap forward and what that's going to take. So that's would be one recommendation. I hope the two of you can, and the board can talk a little bit more about what that actually looks like, and if we need to have a recommendation to the county executive to change the personnel regulations. I think this body would be happy to write a letter saying that, but that would be my intent, I think, because I think that is an opportunity for us to make sure that this work moves forward and that we're not in this place, or the next iteration of this body is not in the same place 5 years from now. So I'll turn it over, Councilmember Friedson or Katz.
So are we only talking about Siegel?
No, we've moved beyond that. Yeah.
Sorry.
No, it's all right.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President. And thank you to the Siegel Group and to the Merit System Protection Board. And Ms. Anderson had said that we have an optimistic outlook, and obviously you're certainly a part of that. And even if you hit the lottery, I know you would want to stay in Montgomery County. I mean, it's like hitting the lottery working for Montgomery County. And I did want to point out that FLSA, for those who don't always follow this, that stands for the Fair Labor Standards Act. And I think you got all the other initials and you explained that, but that was one that didn't get explained. For the whole thing, and I understand for the 5 years that we get to spend $1 million for the, but how did we get to other than it's legislative? How is that just an arbitrary number? How do we get to 5 years? What was that based on?
I'm not really sure. It's been in the personnel regulations for many years, so I'm not really sure what the basis is. I don't know if it was in the previous personnel regulations before the 2001 update. So for whatever reason it's 5 years, I'm not entirely sure.
Well, let me turn to Siegel. In other governments, and I know you do work, everywhere. In other governments, in private industry, do they have that same standard?
Sometimes we're just hired to do the work. So some clients, both in government and higher ed and some other hospital healthcare, they want the audit. So we start with an audit and then do the work to rectify what the issues are.
But I mean, do they do it every 5 years? Do they do it every 2 years?
We recommend 3 to 5, depending on what the market's doing.
I see.
And depending on the organization and your tolerance for it. But sometimes the market's really slow and we'll say, no, don't do it this year. And sometimes they'll say, well, our board said we're going to do it every 2 years. And I will say, let me talk to the board. I don't think you need it this year.
Okay, thank you. And Ms. Anderson, you were the Vice President touched on this as well, but to do reclassifications to the salary structures, whatever, do you have the resources to even do that? Do you have the personnel?
So we were, some vacant positions were reassigned to us so that we could build capacity in the team. We are working to fill those vacancies, and we asked, and you graciously gave us support to hire on a consultant to give a broad review of classification and compensation structures. So that was what we were going to lean into to update as many of the classifications as possible under that kind of throw everything at it structure. And then that would in turn build a routine around how we kept the plan up to date. But as I mentioned earlier, once that gets fixed, we would not maybe have the same pressures around desk audits and other pay equity issues that we have had. Now, there are a few counties, a few government organizations that are leveraging AI to speed certain things. we're exploring all of those things. We're working in partnership with TEBS to look at options to do that. So I would say we don't have all we need right now, but we are on the way.
Well, I thank you. And I, to your point about the biannual report or whatever, however that would work out, to me that makes sense. The fact that we do, and it should be before, even though it might not be an audit that we're paying $1 million for, it might come before the audit committee so that it's the public is aware, we're aware, and it doesn't get lost in the shuffle. So with that, thank you for all you do. Thank you, Madam Chair, Madam President.
Yeah, just briefly. I mean, this is essentially, semi-scientific confirmation of what you've been telling us. So appreciate that. It speaks to two things. One, identifying the problem and coming up with a plan to solve it. But two, having a system. We had this super ambitious standard that we weren't even coming close to meeting, and it just seemed like we kept ignoring it and ignoring it and ignoring it. And so setting a standard that is measurable but achievable is important. Who cares if we have a rigorous standard that we haven't thought about or come close to meeting in anybody's recent memory. I think that's the key point here. Let's come together and figure out, how do we do that? And I was going to ask about the AI piece, so I'm glad you mentioned that. I'm not going to belabor this, but it seemed to me that 75% of what has been discussed here could be handled either now or relatively short order by AI. I mean, both in the overall analysis of classifications across the enterprise and doing that every 2 years, and that effort with a little bit of human help and support, but it doesn't need the horsepower of staffing that it used to, or anywhere close, or shouldn't if the system is set up right. And then even the reclass process, which the report tells us takes an absurd amount of time, just absolutely unacceptable amount of time. Not your fault, but that's just the system that we have in place. AI could be, if we set up the right system, AI could do that with a blink of an eye. And, it could make a recommendation to somebody to say yes or no based on all of the data that would be collected. That would have taken weeks and now could take literally seconds, maybe minutes. So, these are the examples of kind of the internal machinations of AI. I know that much of the focus has been on kind of the external facing that may get a little bit more of the limelight and may be a little sexier. But if we actually want to make government work better and ensure that we're actually handling our business in the way that we say, these are the type of technology improvements that I think we should really be focused on. So please keep us updated on that. If you need our help and support on that, I think that would be a really interesting opportunity, both to change the standards so that it's measurable and achievable, but also to leverage technology. A very modest amount of funding and a very modest amount of focus could yield huge results to actually addressing these issues. So we don't have the numbers that are just staggering that we talked about before in terms of the number of classifications that haven't been looked at in 20 plus years. So thank you for all of the work. Thank you to everybody involved. It seems like we've got the right people in the right places, and now we got to just get it done. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any final comments or anything? We're good to go. All right. Well, again, I think what you're hearing from us, and thank you to the folks at Siegel for the excellent report and terrific presentation today. And just want to say we are here to support all of you. Again, wanted to elevate this to the audit committee, but I'm sure you all will be returning to government operations and fiscal policy. But in the meantime, we don't want a lapse to happen between our communication. So if there is a point at which it makes sense to come back to the GO committee and have further discussions on this, particularly before we do get into the throes of budget, we would very much appreciate that. So Mr. Heffling, if you're talking to the board and they want to come before the committee, Director Anderson, if there's anything, however we can be of support here at the council to help move us forward with this. Great. Thank you so much.
We are more than happy. If you have questions or if you want us to come to another meeting, we're more than happy to do so.
Great. Thank you so much, Ms. Singer. Very much appreciate it. All right.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Great. All right. We will now turn to our next two items, and our Inspector General is here to review those. First, we have a report 25-9, which is the review of the transportation management districts. I'll turn it over to Mr. DeFazio in a moment. And I know we have our Director of Department of Transportation here and other folks from DOT. And I do want to say that for our Inspector General, Ms. Lamarzi, that this is an interesting one because we also have a bill that, and Councilmember Balcom is here right on cue, that has been introduced. This is a topic, the transportation management districts, that the Transportation Environment Committee has taken up numerous times, and I think our goal in having you here today before the Audit Committee was to make sure that before any of the legislation was taken up, before Transportation Environment starts to dig into this again, we heard from your office about what you found in reviewing this. And so just want to say thank you for that, but also to give that context because it's a little different of a report that, the back and forth we may have today since we do have that bill that was introduced. So Mr. DeFazio, do you want to set the stage for anything?
Yep. No, I just want to walk you through the packet briefly. The packet has a quick summary of the report. It also has current engagements for the Inspector General and the Office of Internal Audit, and those are on pages 11 through 15. And there's also the responses from the Chief Administrative Officer as well in there for recommendations. So I'm just going to turn it over to Megan, and she's going to present.
Great. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. As the chair mentioned, this is slightly different kind of a conversation today, in part because as we talk about follow-up and actions that have been taken, DOT has done a lot and they're engaged in a lot of activity, but we are kind of in a holding pattern on a couple of pieces to see what happens with the bill, which I believe goes to T&E on October 20th. So, but this was a program that we identified as an area for review and interest when we were doing our cyclical audits. As you all know, we're required by county law to audit every principal department. So we audited DOT, and while we were there, we did take notice of this program and put it aside for a review rather than being part of the larger audit. But this is a specific program. It dates back to the late 80s. It strives to promote alternatives to single occupancy vehicle use in the county. It was originally organized around a number of districts throughout the county, pretty much focused in areas where there's a lot of businesses. And so our review really focused on the administration of the program and looking at compliance with county law and assessing claims of effectiveness in reducing single occupancy vehicle trips. We focused on data from FY 22 through 24. During that time, DOT was spending about 1.8, there's 1 year where they spend 1.9 million in funds for the districts and their activities. And the funding for this comes from a number of different areas. It comes from fees, from general funds. There's some grant money mixed in, parking citation revenues, revenue from meters, developer contributions, and county law has a number of requirements to increase the program's effectiveness and to enforce compliance, with the idea that being in compliance with those activities is really critical to achieving the goals as this legislation was crafted. One of the requirements is for employers subject to the law to submit transportation demand management plans and commuter habit data, which is gathered by using surveys. Our look at this program did result in 2 findings and 3 recommendations for improvement. While we were looking at the data associated with the program, we recalculated the response rates for submitting plans and survey information, and we showed and found that the responses were incredibly low. The data is very low. There is a target of a 40% response rate for employers that have over 100 employees and a 50% response rate for employers that have under 100 employees. And we found a 4% response rate for those larger employers and a 27% response rate for those with less than 100 employees. So our first finding really is that DOT was not ensuring that the employers complied with county code requirements that are related to the plans and the surveys. Failing to enforce and ensure compliance really does leave a void in the information the county was seeking to obtain and to determine if initiatives are being met, if goals are being met, the value of the program and associated costs are worthwhile. It's a void. Now, I've heard here discussions from a number of folks that there's a lot of other data sources now than there were in 1987, 1990, when changes are being made to the program, and perhaps this may not be the best place to get all of this information. And that's a consideration. I think that's before the council now, but when we do our work, we are looking at what is in place at that time and what are the requirements. So that is why our finding is related to DOT's failure to enforce and to ensure compliance. And so our recommendations are to implement a strategy and increase compliance related to the completion of the plans and increase notifications and seek the appropriate prosecutions that are warranted for failure to comply. There is a penalty if you fail to comply, and there wasn't a compliance factor. We also recommended strategies be developed to increase collection data and the commuting habits of residents. Another requirement in the code does say that DOT is to produce biannual reports to provide an overview of the relevant transportation data and reporting on the sources and the use of all of that data. And that, again, helps for the county to assess the effectiveness, because our goal is always, are the investments that we are making in programs effective in leading to the outcomes that we have sought. And so that data should be available and ideally would be used to inform planning decisions by elected officials, by managers, and by the planning board to ensure and find ways to meet the goals of the county, which is reducing that single occupancy use of vehicles for transportation. Our second finding was that DOT did not publish or provide the affected entities with the reports that they are required to do. Currently, both of these findings, all the associated recommendations, are pending and open in progress from our perspective. The last update we received from DOT was September 12th, and their next update is due on December 12th. Again, some pieces are waiting. I think we are pretty close on 1A. There's a component related to the fines and seeking penalties for noncompliance. That's still yet to come later this fall. But as for finding 2, DOT does not anticipate completing and meeting that recommendation until December of 2026. So this still has a ways to go. I'm happy to answer other questions. I know Director Conklin has a lot to tell you about what they're up to.
Great. Well, why don't we turn it to Director Conklin then?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to this audit today. I think much like in the previous session you just had, there's good information here, but I think we were aware of these issues independent of the audit. I'd like to talk a little bit about the program generally. So there's a component of this that is compliance-driven and survey-driven, and these findings are focusing on that. There's also a lot of other activity that are in community engagement, outreach with employers, and helping people understand what their options are. That's not as rigorous and not as defined as what's in here as specific requirements under the code. And I think that's where the bulk of the effort of the Commuter Services team, and with me today is Haley Peckett, the Deputy Director for Policy, that oversees this area, and Sandy Brecker, who's the Commuter Services Section Manager, who directly manages this activity. So most of the energy of this group and of the contractors that perform services in the TMD are in direct outreach and working with the community to understand what the issues are. And that work is really important. The county spends a tremendous amount of energy and resources on providing transit, biking, walking infrastructure. And these teams are the entities that help our residents and employers communicate to their employees what those options are. And there's significant turnover in both the residential base and in the employers and employees in the county on a regular basis. So this is an ongoing effort to keep that awareness up, and that's really important for me to mention. In terms of the specific recommendations, we've shared with the council the plan to begin the enforcement activities in December of this year, unless we're sort of redirected by changes to the code that would say that's not warranted. So we've been noticing non-compliant employers of their lack of compliance and letting them know that enforcement actions may be coming at a later date if there's not a change in that direction. In terms of the data collection, the quality of responses, and the reliability of the data that's generated by this program, I think the Inspector General's findings are accurate. Survey responses have been declining year after year after year. We've just completed the most recent survey, and we really increased the outreach activity and tried to create more opportunities for people to participate in that survey. That did not yield better response to the survey. So, and we have looked at the survey data we collect and compared it to other sources and find that by and large the results are reliable, but they're based on very small sample sizes. So I know some of you are very familiar with this methodology. As you try to be more specific about what that data means, it's less and less reliable. It may be meaningful at a larger geographic scale where we actually have a representation, but if we're looking at a specific employer and we have a low sample size for that employer, that information is not going to be terribly useful in assessing that employer's effectiveness in that program. So I think it is the time to look for a better data source and a better way to generate this information, because the direct surveying methodology you have in place is becoming less and less effective. In terms of the other finding about the reporting, I do want to note that we had an interruption in the commuter survey around the COVID-19 era and skipped a cycle, but we have published the data that's collected from that survey when it's been collected, and we're about to release the most recent round of reporting. And again, I've already given you the headline that the data is not all that impressive about the degree of response to the surveys. We have not done the broader Transportation Management District reports as the Inspector General has found. It includes a lot of other ancillary information about traffic signal optimization and other transportation trends in the management districts. And we've had discussion in previous budget discussions about whether there's value to that report. Now, there's no question that report is called for in the code, and we should be producing it, and we will do so again, assuming there's not a change in direction with the law for the 2026 which would be the cycle after this audit is complete for those surveys. So the next survey would generate those. So that's sort of my summary of where we are with the audit. I appreciate the work of the Inspector General's office and highlighting these issues. And again, the main benefit of this program is that communication, that outreach, and the activities to make sure people are aware of the options that they have when they arrive at the county or move to a new location or move to a new residence or get a new job, so that they can assess what makes the most sense for them. Because if we don't know our other choices, we will do tomorrow what we did yesterday. And we're trying to change what people do tomorrow. So thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions. Or my colleagues here, if you have specific details on the program's operation, have a lot of information to share.
Great. Thank you. And I think this is helpful in us thinking about, as we move forward in the Transportation and Environment Committee, looking at the legislation and other things in the future of this, because as was noted, this has been around for a while, and things change, and the goal may still be the same about the communication and outreach, but is the way that we've laid it out in the code right now the appropriate way to be doing that? And especially since we actually haven't been following the code exactly as we have to over the last couple of years. So I think I appreciate this report and the director's response to that. I'll turn it over for colleagues if anything specific. I don't know. Council Vice President Joando, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just say, be very brief. I agree. I think I was having deja vu because we had a version of this conversation at full count with the bill, you know, or it was a budget. I can't, whenever that was, but and so we'll have that discussion, obviously. But it's good that everyone agrees that what we're doing isn't working. So, you know, we'll punt on that. Obviously, my main concern, I think, as everyone's, is to make sure we're doing the outreach, but we're getting reliable information to base other policy decisions upon, right? You know, and so I guess that would be a question now, but also in the future of, you know, how concerned are you about that, about the ability to use this data in any functional way? And how's that informing how we go forward here?
Yeah, thank you. So I think this is helpful to talk about the commuter survey. And so we don't have our final report in hand, but we have results. And so the response rates are in the single digits, but we're seeing some of the NADMS, so the non-auto drive share mode, shift by 10 or more points from previous years. And it's hard to know, and it really makes us want to pull in other data. So I think that it's a really interesting conversation. We can certainly get into it more as we talk about legislation, but using multiple data sources. So big data is certainly a possibility, but it has limitations. It's more reliable right now for auto modes than for non-auto modes. We've started conversations with planning around this, but we're kind of recognizing, I think the audit helped us to make this clear. We found when we worked with the county attorney's office, there's nowhere else we know of in the code that actually issues a violation and requires employers or any party to respond at a certain rate. So it's a strange law that is in there in the first place, and our response rates, even going back multiple years, are nowhere near where our targets are. So we recognize that that doesn't make sense moving forward. But that being said, the correct way to corroborate different data is going to depend on this really evolving field of big data, of actual data. And I think our goal of understanding commuter habits at a building or employer scale can be really tricky. And this is true across the field. If we were to audit Fairfax County or, you know, Maricopa County in Arizona, everywhere you would see the gas prices rise. There's a downturn in employment. A new bus route opens. There's so many different things that affect what happens. And on one hand, if you don't have that information at whether it's the TMD level or the employer level that can say, here's what you do and here's how you could adjust your behavior, then all the people that rely on those different transportation services are at a disadvantage without that information. But there's so many factors. It's incredibly difficult to be able to know how to make those decisions based on any one source of information. You really have to pull so much together to be able to try to have a clear picture.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam President.
Great. Councilmember Katz?
Thank you. Is there a fee to submit the plan? There is not. Was there at one point?
There are fees for employers that, well, not for employers. There's no fees for employers. There are fees for developments that are subject to the ordinance, and I can't remember when it was, after 2008.
I'm sorry, Sandy Brecker, Chief of Community Services. 2006 is when the council adopted fees for new developments. At that point, there were just a few that had that reached back, so since 2006, the fee has remained the same: 10 cents per square foot for commercial development only. Does not include the vast numbers of multi-unit residential. They are not paying anything. Only commercial. In a multifamily or multi-unit building, if they have ground floor commercial, that portion of the building would have to pay the fees. And that's only for developments in the TMDs, the Transportation Management District.
I remembered it way back when, but I couldn't remember enough.
Yeah.
And once we do the survey, and obviously the idea is that we want people to have stop the single occupancy or limit the single occupancy, which in itself can be unfair because our colleague, Councilmember Balcom, is here, and in some cases, the up county does not have the same ability to use mass transit as people down county, so therefore that becomes an issue, and depending on where the employee or where the employer is located. But once we know the information, how successful are we at trying to change behavior? Does this survey help at all?
Well, just one observation. The Up County does not have currently a transportation management district, so there are no developments up there that are required to comply. And then the employers do not have any requirements. We just collect plans. We try to use that as a mechanism to work with them, but they don't have to achieve any particular outcome.
So they do not. So if someone is living in the Up County and works in Bethesda, then there's no survey for them.
Correct.
So that in itself, I don't know how much the surveys are going to help.
Well, we still want to try to get data, information, and as Deputy Director Peckett mentioned, we concentrate on the TMDs because that's where the growth and infrastructure policy and the master plans and sector plans have identified goals. And so we've concentrated on the TMDs. But we still are interested in, for major employers in other areas, we do try to get them to participate and get data about their commuting profiles, mostly so that we can work with them, not to administer any kind of, punishments or any fines or anything like that, but mostly so that we can work with them and their employees to try to help them to get, to find more efficient ways of getting to and from work.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Balcom, would you like to ask some questions that you hear?
It looked like Ms. Peckett was going to chime in.
Oh, sorry.
But if not, okay. So I think, thank you. We've been talking about this for a long time. But I think there's a disconnect from the perspective of there's a disconnect between what is in the current law and the proposed regulations and what is currently, how the law has been implemented. So the plan was to expand significantly from the existing TMDs, and there is a fine punishment attached in the current law. So I think it's not, and there is requirements for multifamily. DOT hasn't implemented those, but the current law does have all those things in it. So I think it's important to differentiate between what's currently being implemented and what the current code says.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So there hasn't been an expansion of the transportation management districts yet. The law that was passed a few years ago does contemplate more transportation management districts. In terms of the fines for employer-based plans, there was no change to that. They're the same basis that we've talked about in this audit today, which is failure to produce a plan or failure to produce the report on your plan implementation. Those were the elements leading to employer fines. Now, there is another element to the law that I think is what you're referring to, which is for new employers that would enter this plan and property developments in these places that are not yet TMDs, there were compliance-based plans that required achievement of certain mode shares, and there wasn't a fine associated with that, but there was a requirement that that entity commit additional resources within their own organization, not a fine to another organization, to achieve those goals. So yes, those are elements of the law that have not really, none of the plans have reached the point of that assessment about whether that additional effort would be needed. But okay. Yes, so there's a little, the employer-based thing is not really any different, but there was a difference for developments that were in these other
to the extent that new TMDs were created and then new developments would come into those TMDs, it could potentially in the future, but no, there's been no action to do that. And one thing I want to clarify is that, yes, the law does talk about employers having to file even outside of TMDs. That's what you're referencing, but that's upon notification by the department that they need to file. And so the only employers that we've concentrated on notifying have been primarily in the TMDs. So any of the other employers who are located throughout other areas of the county, unless we have specifically reached out and said, we would like you to do a plan, they aren't under any compunction to do one.
Sure. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to clarify that it wasn't as cut and dry as what's there's a difference between what's currently being implemented and the current code. So it is an interesting time to have the discussion because we have the bill that we will look at in a couple weeks in the Transportation Environment Committee, and then a possibility of that's a full repeal law, but then there's also a proposal for potential replacement. So we'll have many discussions. I guess the only thing that I'm concerned about is the proposed fines to the existing employers in December. I'm assuming that we will take that up. I don't know what the mechanism is to tell DOT to not fine employers, because it doesn't, in my opinion, it just doesn't make any sense to fine employers for these plans, even though it meets the letter of the law, if we're not done with the legislation by December. I guess we can take that up in T&E.
I think we should take it, and given that we don't have the county attorney with us, unless Director Conklin, you have have an answer, I would say that I would like, given that this is audit and we are reviewing the Inspector General report, that is a question I would like to take up at a later time.
I don't have a specific answer other than that's why we propose doing that at a later date rather than immediately.
Great, and that's my only response, my only question.
And that's also the reason we haven't ever done it before.
Thank you. Thank you.
Great. All right. Well, appreciate that. Obviously, more to come on this. Thank you to the Inspector General for that report. Our final item today is Inspector General Report 25-13, MCPS Chromebook Inventory Management. And we have folks from MCPS now joining us. And Mr. DeFazio, if you want to tee us up before we turn it over to the Inspector General.
Absolutely, yes. Similar to the first item, there is a summary in the packet about the Inspector General's report, along with the executive summary and the superintendent's response. I think that's about it, and I'm going to turn it over to Megan.
Thank you. We are here. The second report you asked to discuss today is the Chromebook report that was published in FY25. When we talk about Chromebooks, we mean those laptop computers that students are issued at MCPS. MCPS makes Chromebooks available to their students to enhance their learning and the educational opportunities for all students. In FY23, MCPS spent about $12.8 million on new Chromebooks, and they budgeted for about $9 million in FY24. They were able to leverage a number of grants towards those Chromebooks that year. There are over 200,000 Chromebooks in service spread out across the district, and as we've talked many times, that is clear across the county, all 211 schools. This report sought to evaluate MCPS's compliance with applicable policy, law, regulation, procedures, and specifically looking at inventory management and the inventory management of Chromebooks, and to assess the effectiveness of the internal controls that MCPS has over those devices to mitigate loss and theft. We are in the business of deterring and detecting fraud, waste, and abuse, and internal controls are a key component to that, and inventory controls is a very basic function. The report resulted in 2 findings and 5 recommendations for improvement. You'll see as we keep going that one of those recommendations we've already closed and consider that corrective action has been put in place that would address that issue. Our work for this report was conducted between October of 2024 and February of 2025. To perform the work, we reviewed relevant criteria, those policies, procedures. We conducted interviews with relevant staff, tested available records and inventory. We went into some schools to test their inventory at a specific moment in time. While we were there at the schools, we tested against available records to determine if Montgomery County Public Schools could account for where their devices were at a given moment. We went to 9 schools. They were randomly selected, 3 high schools, 3 middle schools, 3 elementary schools across the county in different areas. When we went to those 9 schools, We were able to test in 7, and the reason that 2 of those schools we weren't testing is because those schools use what they call a cart model, which means all of the Chromebooks are on a cart in the classroom, and frankly, we didn't want to disrupt the classroom activities that day, and we were there for a moment in time. So of the 7 that we were able to test at that moment, only 2 could account for all of their Chromebooks that day. After we left, we gave the schools time to find missing devices, but they only found about half at that point. So what that led to is what you see as finding 1, which is that the inventory records are inaccurate and that not all devices could be located. What it shows is that the system isn't keeping real-time data, and that's a vulnerability for loss and theft, and it can interfere with proper planning and accountability. And so the first recommendation is to conduct periodic inventory reconciliations at all schools and to maintain up-to-date inventory records. We also found that MCPS does not have a comprehensive regulation or procedure for Chromebook inventory management as a whole. Having formal policies and procedures, regulations are what we would most likely see at MCPS, because policies come from the board. Regulations are there. Those ensure that there's consistent practices. It reduces risks for loss and theft. It increases the efficiencies. It protects against unnecessary purchasing. You know exactly how many you have, what you need or don't need. So you have more precise budgeting. And it increases operational readiness. Ensure that you can get students the devices that they need when they need them and where you can locate them. We identified a number of areas that supported the need for comprehensive inventory management regulation and procedures, which is finding 2. We saw that in ServiceNow, which is the system that MCPS uses to track their inventory, it wasn't current. There wasn't a great deal of consistency in what information was kept in the system. There were some functionalities that could improve the ability to locate and keep accurate inventory records. Fines for loss or damage were being inequitably assessed, and fines are a deterrent and to ensure that we have controls over our inventory. Not all the staff was aware of their roles and responsibilities. Some didn't have access to the necessary training because it was an ancillary duty in some of the schools, and they had to keep different records. Everyone chose on their own way how they were going to keep records and how they would track things. If there were discrepancies, there wasn't a set way to investigate those discrepancies or variances. And if you don't do that early on, it makes it harder to address issues later, and it can lead to failure to find that you perhaps have a larger issue at play than you may not. And so all those concerns really can be addressed by limiting those vulnerabilities and remedied through a comprehensive regulation and detailed procedures. And so the recommendations related to finding 2 are about designing and implementing those regulations, ensuring there's formal guidance and training, requiring that staff understands the roles and responsibilities in inventory management and what they need to be doing, and then implementing a process for investigating those discrepancies. MCPS accepted all of our recommendations. As I mentioned, recommendation 2B, and you see it up there, evaluating and implementing formal guidance regarding fines for lost and damaged Chromebooks. That has been completed, and we did get a copy of that, so we were able to review it. So we consider that one closed at this point. We last received an update from MCPS August 26th, so their next update to us is due November 24th.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Lamarzi, for that. I now turn it over to Ms. McGuire to walk through MCPS's update.
Thank you, and I'll turn in a moment to my colleagues who are much closer to the work to walk through. But certainly this is a very important area for us to formalize, strengthen, and really be more consistent in our approaches to our processes. And again, you know, this is a large part of our work in this year and last year, and probably a little bit more going forward. But we do take all of this work very seriously to ensure that our schools have the structures and supports that they need to follow the processes, and that we centrally also have clear processes and are able to share both in the support and the accountability. So I just wanted to highlight that, again, this is an area where we have made significant progress in communicating with our schools and in getting some of those pieces started and in place. Again, understanding that the fuller scope of the regulation and some of the very formal aspects are obviously still in progress.
Good afternoon. My name is Dominique Lewis, or Nick Lewis. I'm the new Director of Cybersecurity and Technology Infrastructure. I have Brandon Farrow and Melissa Morrow with me today. They're the IT supervisors for the school technology support team. And let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I think the recap has already been given, so I'm not going to go into this very much, but I will say that we've been working diligently on understanding the requirements. There were 2 findings, 5 recommendations, and we've been working through all of those. I will be addressing the first finding and its recommendation, and then Mr. Farrell will update on the second finding. Next slide, please. Okay, with this first finding, again, it's already been stated, but the Chromebook inventory records were inaccurate. Some devices could not be located, and the recommendation is, of course, to conduct periodic inventory reconciliations at all schools and maintain updated records. Next slide. So to address this finding, MCPS has continued to improve the ServiceNow implementation by, in adding to the inventory management system that is available. To support this effort, we've also added some dedicated staff at the central office, some dedicated resources to assist with the inventory tracking. MCPS has implemented procedures to ensure that new devices, as they are coming into the environment, are uploaded as soon as they're barcoded into the ServiceNow system. So as soon as it comes in, we have a good understanding of that life cycle, or at the beginning of the life cycle. And then we've created new forms within ServiceNow so that when a device is checked out to a student, a person is responsible, well, when we send it to a school, a person is responsible for checking in that device at that school. And then when it's checked out to a student, then it's checked out within ServiceNow to that student. That student is then logged into the system. And then when that student returns the device, then it's checked back in within ServiceNow. We are also generating, we're working on new internal reports, new dashboards, so that school principals and others are more aware of their inventory, what's in their environment, what they're responsible for. We're also developing new integrations. Actually, I lost track. Next slide, I'm sorry. We have some new integrations within ServiceNow where with the Chromebooks is part of Google's infrastructure, and so we get some information from Google. We're integrating the ServiceNow data with the Google data so that when someone logs into a device, we know exactly, that person's logged in, and then we can compare that to what's in ServiceNow and know that there's a discrepancy. We've started the process of doing discrepancy reports where we get a report from Google and we look at the ServiceNow, and it's right now a manual process. This year we are working on automating that process so that we are more aware more quickly when someone is logging into a device at a location that's unexpected. We're still working out that process to make it automated, but the manual process, we've started with a few schools, and we're still working through any kinks with that. We're also going to have some staff to help with the physical inventory. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Farrell to speak about finding 2.
Next slide, please. So the second finding was that MCPS didn't have a comprehensive regulation or procedure addressing Chromebook inventory management. The 4 recommendations that you see are that we need regulations and procedures for Chromebook inventory management, implement formal guidance regarding the assessment of fines for lost or damaged Chromebooks, require training for staff involved in inventory management, and implement a formal process for investigating losses and discrepancies with the inventory. Next slide, please. We decided the first step towards meeting these recommendations was to improve our communication and guidance to the schools. Staff from the Division of Technology Services met with school IT and media staff over the summer to identify some of the challenges that they are experiencing in managing Chromebook inventory in their schools. We found that in many schools, particularly elementary and middle schools, Chromebook management responsibilities often fall disproportionately upon media staff rather than being approached collaboratively. So we addressed this with our Chromebook inventory assignment and distribution memo that was sent to schools on October 2nd. The memo serves a few purposes. One, it informs schools of the roles and responsibility of their school's dedicated IT system specialists. It also informs schools that they need to create a school technology committee to ensure shared ownership of all of the tasks related to Chromebook inventory and management. In addition, it asks schools to identify the members of their technology committee and which Chromebook management duties they'll be performing via a Google form. The form is intended to guide collaborative discussions in determining which staff are responsible for each of the Chromebook management duties at the school. Then our department will use those form responses to target the identified staff for our Chromebook management communications as well as professional development moving forward. We've also updated our ServiceNow resource library to a newer and improved Google site and began holding quarterly office hours sessions for media staff back in September. And then we've always had office hours for IT staff that will continue on a monthly basis. Next slide, please. As mentioned before, we collaborated with our Department of Financial School Support to improve the guidance regarding fines for lost and damaged Chromebooks in a memo that was sent to schools in August. Later in the school year, we will share updated guidance for collecting devices from students who are either graduating from MCPS or transitioning to new schools. This guidance will include new reports to help schools proactively identify which students are not returning to their building, which will allow them to collect devices in advance of them leaving. In addition, we created a Chromebook safety tips video for students that teach them how to properly care for, handle, and carry their Chromebooks. Next slide. Our next step is to compile our current guidance, procedures, and best practices into a formal Chromebook regulation by June of 2026. We are also in the process of reviewing and updating MCPS Regulation IGT-RA, which focuses on user responsibility for MCPS computer systems. Lastly, we're in the process of developing an internal dashboard to support Chromebook inventory management. This tool will provide school-specific insights, including repair rates, inventory levels, and Chromebook repair fees collected throughout the school year. It will also help us to proactively identify schools that may require additional attention before major issues arise. Next slide. And I believe that's it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for that. Thank you for the update on the progress you all have made. Mr. Lewis, I just have one question for you before I turn it to my colleagues. I was curious when you're talking about matching from the Google information and the sign-in, and what do you do if it doesn't match up? Like, what's the point of that?
So the purpose is when we identify that a device is located in the wrong school, we know for a fact if it's coming from Google that someone's logging in. We know it from the network information that it's at that location. So then we update the ServiceNow information, but we also reach out to the school to find out why that may have changed. What happens sometimes is that a student transfers from one school to another school, and so that may not have been recorded within ServiceNow, but we know that that device is in a different place, so now we can rectify that and reconcile it. We normally work with our IT specialists that are assigned to the school to really track down exactly what took place.
Great. So you're really able to track each of the individual devices now. Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Terrific. And Council Vice President Juanda?
Thank you. Yes. Appreciate this and coming at this from a number of angles. The audit committee member, chair of the education committee, and a dad with Chromebooks at home. And some that have been broken or lost. We paid our fee though, but so please pay your fees. So I did want to ask about the Google thing. I'm glad the president brought that up. What data are you getting from Google? Like, what's the actual data? Like, you just log in or location or what?
So we get a variety of data from it, but the primary thing that we're looking at is the user login and the IP address from which it's coming from, because within our network, we know the network addresses and that. So that's the primary thing, other than the model and the specific name of the system and all of that. But that's what we're really looking at for this particular project. There are other pieces of information that come in from Google, but that's outside the scope of this integration.
Well, that was it was kind of a data privacy security question in that, we're not over-indexing anything or using it for any other purpose.
We're not. I mean, I would just point out that, again, we do have certain responsibilities under federal law, since these are minors, to ensure that our network is safe from what it needs to be safe for. So we do certainly balance the privacy with our responsibility to safeguard what minors have access to. So that would be the other component of the data.
No, I appreciate that. And I just want to acknowledge that this is a tough job, like, in the rapid nature in which, coming during the pandemic, just how many of these went out and how that happened very quickly. So, just want to, I think that should be stated, but we still should have we spent a lot of money on it because it was needed. And obviously when we don't know where they are, that's a disservice. It's not only an issue on the waste, fraud, and abuse side, but it's an issue on students actually having access, being able to connect and doing what they need to do in the classroom. Really happy to hear about the internal dashboard development. I think that'll be really helpful going forward. So what was the timeline on that?
So we're in the process of working on the dashboard. I believe we're looking at the calendar year to have it completed. It's an ongoing effort. So they're meeting weekly, I believe, to get the dashboard and set up. It's going to be internal, where the principals and APs can see the information, but we're not going to release that to the public because there might be a little bit too many details there for the public.
So end of this calendar year, beginning of next calendar year?
Yes, this calendar year.
Okay.
Yes.
And the regulation itself on Chromebook usage and all this, June 2026 is what you're targeting?
That's what we're targeting.
Okay. And just for me, that's 8 months-ish. Okay.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Got it. Ms. Ward.
That's really just so that, again, we see the formal regulation as the culmination of this work. Certainly, it would be no later than that. If we do feel that we have our procedures in place before, we could always finalize it sooner. But I think the important thing is to get through the elements of the work and then be sure the regulation can reflect all of the components accurately.
I appreciate that. And have we seen improvements just in what you are tracking as far as the Chromebooks coming in, tracking more of them, and how are you measuring that as you're building the plane here?
So I believe that we have seen some improvements because we are seeing the discrepancy reports and seeing the, where devices are showing up in the wrong place. As far as the tracking, I don't think I can speak to that right now. Brandon, do you have anything you want to?
I can't speak to specific schools, but I know there has been just more focus on making sure your inventory is in the correct place and you're tracking it as it gets distributed to students and into classrooms. So I would think that there's been improvements just in the mindset. I don't particularly have the data yet to show.
Exactly.
Well, I appreciate that. And obviously, the Education and Culture Committee will follow up on this as you move along too, because we're curious to see how this is going. And just personal point, are you Wayne and Linda Farrell's son?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, okay. I've known you since you were very small.
Yeah, but I think we're about the same age.
Yeah, I know.
So-
Which is crazy. But
And
I guess
know
I was
both your
small
parents
too.
as-
But anyway, tell them I said hi, please.
And I know both of your parents as well and your sisters, so
Yeah.
thank you for all your service.
Yeah. Take care. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Councilmember Friedman.
Montgomery County is a small town, as evidenced by this work session and hearing. First of all, thanks for being here. I just want to start the responses to this OIG report. I think were more responsive and better. I made some comments about the tone and tenor of the responses in our previous conversations. I just want to express my appreciation for that. If I call out the things I don't like, I should call out the things that I do like. And so just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate that. There's a lot of concurrence and a lot of agreement, in a spirit of we understand we need to do better and we're working on it and, working together to figure it out. So just wanted to acknowledge and appreciate that. I just have a few questions based on this. Page 3 of the report, the OIG notes that MCVS has postponed purchasing of additional Chromebooks in FY25. Just wanted to get a sense of the school system's plan for additional purchases the rest of this year and into the future.
Okay, actually, there's a different group that normally takes care of this part for us. But for FY26, we have purchased some additional Chromebooks based on ensuring that we have enough Chromebooks per student, as well as a 20% over in each of the schools, so that if a device is broken, we can quickly get them a new device and get them up to speed. So in FY26, we did make some Chromebook purchases.
And I would just say, so Chromebooks devices is certainly continues to be a very important part of our platform for a number of reasons, and not least of which is I believe it aligns with some of our requirements with state protocols. However, we are taking a very deep dive look at our technology budget overall, at the structure of how we've worked with both TechMod and our operating dollars. And so I think in that respect, we're also evaluating again how we can make the best use of our inventory. Part of that is the process that, again, my colleagues here have described. And some of that is looking at what's the most effective model within the schools. Is the CART model a more effective model in some areas? Again, really wanting to just look hard at those purchases and how we can structure that to be as efficient as possible. So I would say that, again, certainly at the time that this report came out, we were closing out 25. We are in 26, and as has been described, we're making some purchases. But I would just say as we're looking ahead, again, we're trying, as we are in so many areas of the school system's budget, to really just look again to be sure that we're evaluating both our fiscal practices, our contractual practices, and our operational practices to be as efficient as possible.
Got it. So just to clarify, the postpone was a temporary postponement. You were assessing the current situation. Of course, that assessment's much harder when you don't really know what the inventory is. So this is an important exercise. I will say, to a certain extent, you were flying blind in that sense from an inventory standpoint. So it speaks to why this is important. And when you're talking about tens of millions of dollars of technology investments, it's critical, not to mention the learning needs and the teaching requirements of the classroom. So, okay. So flip the page to the 4th page. OIG notes that Chromebooks were excluded and continue to be excluded from the biennial physical inventory. And I know you're working on updates to that. I get that. Whose decision was that? Was that a board decision? Was that a staff recommendation? Was that just an error? Was that the fact that when this was done, there were no Chromebooks, and so it just wasn't included and nobody bothered to update it when Chromebooks came onto the scene and we invested?
So
Yeah, so go ahead, please.
So I don't know that any of us here at the table can give a specific history of that decision making. I will say that, as Chair Jawando indicated, we went big on Chromebooks during the pandemic, and then they were for some time operated or accounted for and managed separately from our other inventory processes. So I don't have a more specific answer as to how that separation came to pass. I will say that again, what you're hearing here is absolutely a commitment to join those. Part of the regulation work that we want to do and that will take us time is to ensure that our inventory processes are aligned. We don't know that they need to be in the same regulation because, again, we want to really evaluate those work streams, but they will be aligned and there will be regular inventory practices. We're committed to that, and we're committed to putting that in place.
Appreciate that. I'm process agnostic. I'm outcome focused, and I think all of us are. I mean, it's not our job to tell the school system, what the process should be. It's our job to make sure that there is a process and that it's being followed. And so, please keep us posted on that, whether it's a separate process or the same process. To me, it doesn't really matter. But we need to be able to keep track of the inventory and know where it is. And obviously, as evidenced by the OIG report, that hasn't been the case, and you've acknowledged that, which I appreciate. So where are we now? I understand, prospectively, there's a commitment to update the regulations to create a system that actually works to address the problems. Where are we on the actual current Chromebooks that MCPS has today, and in accounting for those Chromebooks? So, since the release of this report, essentially, have all the Chromebooks been accounted for? And could you go to a particular school if the OIG goes back to the 7 schools, doesn't interrupt the 8th school? Would we know where all the Chromebooks are, and could you account for them?
So I'll take a swing at this one. I can't guarantee you 100%, obviously, but our process is in place to where we have conducted inventories. We know how many were issued to, or how many Chromebooks were issued to each of the schools, and who those Chromebooks were issued to. We have that surplus that's in each school. We know that the ITSS, which is our technical person, they have the accountability for those extra devices. And so we have confidence that our process is in place. Everyone who is supposed to be responsible are taking the appropriate actions. And I can't guarantee 100%, but if the OIG did come and audit the school, then I do believe that we would pass that audit.
Please.
Just one additional thing to add. It was mentioned during the course of the report, they didn't have the ability to locate devices that were in carts. We've since updated service now to have a cart field so that we can particularly say for a certain device, it's in this classroom, in this cart, which would allow for somebody doing an audit to know where devices are within a school. That's a cart model. So that's one improvement that's been made since this spring.
Okay, so it sounds like, and I just want to make sure this is how you feel and are standing by it, that the current inventory that MCPS has when it comes to Chromebooks, that you have put in place now a process that you didn't have before, but now we need to set up a system and have a regulation and a policy that backs it up in order to ensure that that continues in the future?
That's accurate, yes.
Okay. Is there anything that the OIG wants to share on this that would counteract that or would add to that?
Say one thing
Please.
before she responds. We have a October deadline to provide additional information, and so that information is not, I don't think, has been processed or received yet. So while we are saying all of this, there is still an update that I think is still pending at the end of this month.
Okay, that was going to be my follow-up question, the OIG, of what information do you currently have to validate that, and what information do you need to validate that and feel confident with it? Right.
We're in between.
Right.
So the last update we had was in August. And at that point, they were still in the planning phase, is what the response from the superintendent said. And again, at the end of October, that they would have something to show us. And so we wait, we see what they have to say, and then we'll go back and follow up with questions. Like I mentioned in the one that we have been able to close, they told us that they had issued guidance. We said, can we see it? They were very quick to send it over to us. We were able to review that and make a determination. So it is an ongoing process, and we're going to continue with our process. And we've had really open communication with MCPS on this issue and expect nothing different as we move forward.
Great. Okay, thank you. I'll yield back.
Great. Councilmember Cass, anything? No, I think we've gone through it all. We appreciate you coming in today and updating us. Appreciate the Inspector General. We will see you back again, I think next month or later this month. October 30th, I think, is the next time. So still in October. Anyway, thank you, Mr. DeFazio, for that. With that, Audit Committee is adjourned. Thank you all.